Hello, guys. Welcome back. Let's see what we can do today. Hopefully, we're not gonna get stuck in the porous world for too long. I know it's a torture. I totally get it. It's yeah. I told you guys it gets me sometimes too. Just to get the scale correct and all that stuff. But there's a lot we can do with the additional passes as well. It's like the other stuff we're gonna be doing with the model. So don't worry too much. I mean, like as long as the scale is correct, there is a lot we can do to just like mix the detail with the other stuff. So let me just share it here, and let's take a look. Okay, so today I think what I had planned was to actually explore some of the texturing, right? Like not actually doing any albedo color just yet, but actually exploring some of the other passes. I'm still in the process of trying to learn about a darker skin, what would be like the best approach for it. And so there are two things I was thinking about. Like the first one was to actually eliminate like any color I had in my model before. Remember I had like a temporary color assigned to the model that I kind of like shifted towards brownish, but then I basically eliminate the whole color. So at this point, this is what I have. It's just a plain color, and it just has a specular map in here. Not a specular map. This is actually a bump height map that I'm using to modulate the whole thing. So what I'm going to be talking about today is how to mix like this displacement map with the bump height map to create a little bit more variation. You can see that the lips are very shiny, right? And then the nose is slightly shiny, and those areas here are a little bit less shiny. So as I mentioned before, a way to accomplish this is by basically creating a simple roughness map, if you want to do that. But the way I'm doing this is basically like I'm creating some basically like micro bump, right? Like a tiny little cellular kind of bump, and then using that to break up the surface. So where it's the bump is higher, like it has more height, it becomes more diffuse like that, a little bit more rough. And the areas that I don't have any bump at all, then it becomes like this. And then anything in between, you can go like super rough and have like almost like no speck because the surface is so broken down that you don't see any speck. Or you can, it's like create anything in between that. So I thought it would be interesting to just explore without any texturing at first. But I'm going to be talking about like some ideas I had about how to approach texture. And also the cool thing about like approaching this way is that instead of like trying to bake all those textures, like I mentioned before, remember like trying to get that average color, I'm kind of like getting the average color in here. And basically what I'm doing here, I removed any map. So I'm just using this color here that in my case at this point, I'm still studying it. I might go a little bit lighter or something, but I have like a 16, 0.778, and then 0.060 here. That's what I have so far. This is going to be evolving, obviously. It's just a ballpark. And then for my settings here, just a quick update. That's like experiments, right? Until we have everything settled in a way that actually works. But that's just out of curiosity if you guys are, but don't take everything with a grain of salt because that's just like in progress. So I'm just using the specular at 0.400 with the roughness at 0.1, just to create a little bit more of the tight specs, right? And index of refraction 1360. For the subsurface, I'm using that color I just mentioned. And then for the radius, I'm using, let's see if I switch back to 0 and 1 here. So originally, remember like that what the Arnold manual mentions is like 1, 0.35, and 0.20. Instead of 1, I'm just using 0.9. So that's the only difference between what they mention in their manual and what I have here. So using RGB 0 to 1, using 0.9, 0.35, and 0.2 in my case here specifically. Random walk 2, and then scale 135. It can be a ballpark between, let's say, like 115 and 150, something in that ballpark. But in this case here, I'm settling around 135 for now. I might go a little bit lower than that. And then the coat, I'm actually making the roughness fairly high, right? 0.520, and then the weight at 0.300. The color, let me see, the color I think is completely white. Yeah, it's totally white. That's good. And index of refraction of 1.550. So that's what I have so far. I mean, like the shin here is 0.05. I'm adding a tiny little bit. Remember, this one is the one that simulates the micro fuzz in the velvet or satin, right? But when you apply it to the skin, you have to be very careful with it. We're already going to be using, you know, it's like actual peach fuzz later, so this might not be like, you know, very useful if you crank it too much. But this is cool because you get a little bit of the Fresnel kind of on the side in there, and the roughness is 0.120. So what I have assigned here for the bump mapping, I have this AI cell noise. And that's what we're going to be talking about. So let's, before you do this, let's just jump right back to ZBrush in here. So what I did, so because all my models, they share the same base mesh, right? Like I have the same base mesh assigned for all those models. I can basically, at any time, morph target blend shape between all those models. You know, it's like from all those classes, because I always use my go-to base mesh, right? Some of them have different UVs, because obviously when you actually changing your model, you're gonna end up like changing the UVs eventually, right? Because you have to make sure that everything is unwrapped. Sometimes a model has a very long nose, and then you assign the same maps, like the same UVs for a person with a tiny nose, and then all of a sudden, like there's a stretch that's happening in the UVs, and then you don't want that. So so the first thing you're gonna do here, I'm gonna show you the maps I have first, and then we're gonna try to you know, organize these UVs and just like unfold things again a little bit, like in Maya, just so we are make sure that everything is in place, you know. So what I did here, I actually imported some of those meshes from my Stan Winston model, and then that way I have all the poly paint already in place, right? So I don't need to reinvent the wheel. But like I said before, I'm going to be showing you guys how I paint the specular, the techniques and everything. But we actually going to paint just the albedo color together, like in live. And I'm going to be demoing how to paint the specular and the bump height, which you're going to notice they're very simple maps. For example, like the bump height in here, if I open to show you what I have, I'm going to switch to flat color. So that's basically what the map is. I'm not using any specific brush to create this. It's basically like no brush whatsoever, right? It's just the regular standard. And then I'm painting a black and white map. So the logic in here is everything that's in black is gonna be, the height's gonna be much smaller, right? So in areas around the eyelids, right there, I need it to be very shiny, right? Like especially the internal part of the eyelids. Inside of the nose, I want a little bit more moist in there. The lips, right? But you see, like this came from another model, so a lot of stuff needs tweaking, right? I need to actually blend those things better, do a better paint job. And then I'm kind of like taking into account that T-zone, right? So I have my nose in here going towards the forehead. And then the forehead, actually, the T-zone, I can actually eliminate some of that stuff from the top, but it's getting shiny all the way through. And then I don't like to have a lot of shininess right here in the muzzle, so I remove that a little bit, and then back to shiny in the chin. So basically, like everything that's black, it becomes like less bumpy. Everything that's white, more bump, right? So inside of the ears, for example, I want it to be a little more shiny in there because of the wax, right? And you know, the oils and everything inside. But then around here, I don't want a lot of specularity, right? A little bit more speck in here, less speck in there, you know. So it's a matter of like, again, like this is the kind of stuff I can, you can use as a visual reference for your own reference in there, but your model might demand a different paint, right? Like you might demand like, okay, my character, like based on the references, I see that his cheeks are not as shiny, so I got to paint this area a little bit wider than what Chris has in there. And for the nose as well, you know, it's like, oh, maybe the nose is much shinier than this one. And but one thing you have to keep in mind always is that this bump height map, it has to play nice with the actual displacement map, right? So if you have a nose like this, like I have, and it's very black in here, right? Like a very dark in there. So that means, like in theory, it should produce a very shiny result at the end. But then what's going to happen is going to depend on how much displacement you have sculpted in there, right? Because otherwise, one is going to be countering the other one. For example, like you can eliminate like all the, the bumpiness from this area here, but then you look at the displacement map and then maybe you have a ton of bump sculpted in the displacement, and then that's not going to have any effect. So it's always a matter of like plugging both maps together and seeing how they play, right? So you can test one at a time. So for example, like sculpt the displacement, plug it in there. If you notice that that's a little bit too bumpy in this area, no matter how much you try to add like a bump height like this with a very low intensity for the height, it still is not going to produce enough specular because the displacement is actually breaking up the specular way too much. So it's always a combination of like how the bump height and the displacement are going to be playing together. So just keep that in mind. So in terms of the UVs, so let's adjust those UVs before you go further here. Let me just show you the other maps just out of curiosity for now. So this is basically like the specular map I have. You see, it's a very simple map. It just has a ton of like noise in there. Sometimes if it's too noisy like that, it ends up like not looking very realistic. So this is an old model that I did. So my plan is to actually make this a little bit more even, because we have enough breakup already happening in the displacement and with the bump height. We're going to be using the micro bump in there. So sometimes if you have this like too noisy, which is basically like I'm trying to break up this it's like the oil kind of like pass in the skin a little bit further. But if the difference is too big, if the noise is too evident like that, sometimes it doesn't produce a great result. So I'm going to be refining this map in the in the next couple of days with you guys. And then the other one is the albedo color, right? So the albedo, this one comes from Stan Winston again, right? And you see like it's trashed in there because I moved this model around a lot, right? If I switch back to my skin shade here, for example, kind of looks like that. It looks like a, yeah. So the cool thing about this that I thought that could be an interesting approach if you guys are having trouble finding, for example, like the skin tone for like a darker skin, I thought it would be interesting to try out perhaps this new feature in the polypaint, right? That you noticed like in this new ZBrush. I'm using 2020. So if you go to your polypaint now, you have this feature here that says adjust colors, right? So that might be an interesting way to do it, because I mean, like if you're reusing skin from some other model, like in this case here, right? Maybe as a starting point, maybe you can try that. It's like that's how I did my Hellboy, like shifting stuff. Although I did in Maya, but now that you have this feature, it's fairly easy if you click adjust colors. So that's basically what I had adjusted before, just to check. So basically what I did here, I went from 1 for the gamma, and then it was a 0 in here. So I had this, right? So I actually brought down the HSV intensity like that, right? And then you can combine that with RGB gamma as well. So it gets a little bit more saturated when you go down. So you can try a combination of both, And I think as a ballpark, you actually might be really, really useful, to start from something like this, because at least you get some of the color variation. You don't have like the lighter colors and everything we're going to be sculpting or painting for the cartilage and stuff like that. But overall, you can actually get some interesting results. Let me see if I can find the other guy I had here. Yeah, for example, like this guy, right? Like the skin is a little bit lighter than what I have in there. But if you have something like that, for example, you can start playing with the intensity and the RGB in here, and get a little bit more of that feeling, like a little bit more redness and dark at the same time. So it's like I might experiment with that and try to find out if there is a nice balance. So if you just conform it, for example. Now I have it applied here, right? So that's a brand new polypaint. So at this point, if I simply exported my maps, I would get this, and then I could start tweaking from there, right? And I also can actually pick a color with the color picker here and try to find, for example, an average color that I can start from. let's say like this color here, for example, is what you found. It's like red 78, 78, 47, 31. But this one I had here in Maya, let's see how similar it is. Yeah, so it's like it's different, but I mean, like between the two of them, I think I can get a clue about like, you know, what would be more interesting as to start as a base color, and then start adding the variations on top of it. But I think like in terms of approach, it might not be a bad idea if you already have like a you know, like a pale skin painted that you can reuse, you know, just like by not desaturated, but turning everything darker. So at least you preserve some color variation, you know, it's like get some redness in certain areas, but it might be an interesting thing. So this one here, I did in a copy of my model. I actually had my HDs in here, and then which I projected this stuff to the HD, like the pale color from Stan Winston. But I had a copy in here just to play around with this possibility of having like a, you know, it's like this new color correction thing inside of ZBrush. So basically, in terms of maps in here, you see, like I don't have a lot. I mean, like with for the Stan Winston model, that's all I used. I only used like the albedo color, the specular map, which I use for the coat as well, and just with different settings inside of Maya, and then the bump height map, and that was about it, you know. So before we go further, let's take a look at how we're gonna fix those UVs. So I'm gonna go to my main model, this guy here. I'm gonna go to the lowest level, and just make sure we have like the latest. So I'm just gonna export this one to OBJ. So the head is gonna be a head low res, so LR. Let's go for 9. And then let's go back to Maya, and let's adjust this just a little bit. Let's save this guy here, just save some renders to compare later. And let's just close everything. So this head here, and let's just hide it for now. And I'm gonna just bring the one I just exported from ZBrush. So low res 9. So if you click the model, and if you're using your own model right now, for example, or the model you downloaded from the website, if you go to modeling, Windows Modeling Editors UV Editor, you're gonna be able to see. Let me just switch to my XGen Interactive. I like this interface better. And let me do that again. Let me just get the Windows Modeling Editor and UV Editor. So now I have all my aisles in there, and but this model here originally was an old model, right? So you probably like the UVs are not relaxed perfectly for this model just yet. So you know, the way I do this, I basically right-click when I want to select something. Right-click, and you click UVs, right? So you can select, for example, like a few UVs in here in the middle, and then you can control right-click, and then you can say to shell. Right, and now you have the entire thing selected. So let's see, under tools, actually not tools, let's go to modify. So you go to modify, and then you have unfold, which is Control U. So let's click the option box in here, and then basically like you can pin stuff. This one actually doesn't have, yeah, it doesn't have, like the legacy has pin borders and stuff. This one doesn't. But it should be fine. So let's just apply it and see what the Unfold 3D does. So it's a very different model, right? From this to this, right? So that means that now the model is going to be actually unfolded in a way that the model is more proportional, right? Like, so the distribution of the texture across the model is going to follow the structure of the model itself instead of like generating a lot of stretching and everything. But obviously now I have like those guys intersecting in there, but which are going to have to unfold as well. So let's just move the head down slightly right here. Let me get this one. Same thing. Let me just bring up just to get a little closer to what that one is. And try to avoid being too close to the borders. obviously it's going to be 8K, so like it should be enough space in there, but depending on what's the border you're using the exporter, if you have like 10, for example, and you have less than 10 here, you might get some weird stuff happening. You just make sure you have enough space between things. So I selected those guys, gonna just press Control U to unfold. Right, so it changed a tiny little bit. Just gonna move them out of the way there, and then Control Select to actually deselect that one and bring this one out. Gonna fold this, like you pick just like a few vertices from each one of those, and then right Control click, and then to shell, and then Control U again. Oops. Control U to unfold. Let's move this one up. So basically, like this is like the eye bags, I believe, right? Like, so I cut it from there because I don't like having like all the intersections. So I like having unfolded kind of like this. But it's totally up to you guys. And those guys here, I don't need to have in there. So I'm just gonna move them out of the way. Let me see, I can even put it right there. I have plenty of space in here. Let's get this guy a little bit more separated. Yeah, anything like that. Same with this guy, gonna bring it up right there, and then, oops. 1, 2, Control, shell. Let's bring this one in here. I don't need to be that precise, right? I mean, I'm just being a little anal here. We'll be stuff in a similar position, but I don't need to do that. And then let's just get some of those guys and unfold them as well. You can do unfold in one pass if you want. I'm just doing like in multiple here, but do everything at once. So it changed a little bit. This guy here is almost touching the, he is actually barely, you know, gonna have to separate that little border a little bit. Remember that ZBrush is very sensitive to overlapping in your UVs. If you have any overlapping, the map sometimes completely explode. You get like some streaks going around the whole surface of the map sometimes. It becomes a mess. So it's very sensitive. To geometry in general in ZBrush, things that are basically a little bit more acceptable in Maya, that you probably, you know, is not gonna bother too much and it's gonna render. In ZBrush, if the model has any problems, it really chokes sometimes, you know, it's like and it's hard to bug track it. So let's do all of the other ones here at once. So I'm just gonna select a bunch like that. Control, right click to shell, and then Control U. Unfold everything at the same time. That's pretty good. So those guys, let's move them out of the way. I might have to shrink. Actually, I don't need to shrink. I just have to bring it down a little bit and maybe move those guys up. So let's do that. Let's get to the side. There is a way here in Maya, obviously, you can actually lay out stuff automatically. You know, you can just like tell Maya, I need to distribute this way, and Maya does automatically for you. So you can try that if you want, but I'm doing manually here. This one here, I can actually flip it. It's like I'm using W to move, and then E to rotate, and R to scale, right? But scale, I'm not gonna play with it. I'm just gonna keep the scale as is. So let's see if this one I can fit there. Probably not. Maybe if I can rotate a little bit. See if I can funnel it. No, let's see. Here I think he's gonna fit. So let's put it like that. And then move this guy out a little bit. Yeah, something like that should work. See this up. Just to make sure, you know, it's like this, it might be a little overkill, but it's good, you know, it's like that the model is completely unfolded because you don't want to have like any stretching going on with the textures, you know. So yeah, it takes a little bit of time, but it's good to show you guys as well because we didn't talk too much about UVs at this point. And the way I start these UVs normally, so there are a couple of steps, right? Like you start with ZBrush, that's how I do it. And I create a bunch of polygroups in ZBrush. So for example, if I'm in ZBrush, I create my polygroups. If I do let's pretend I have polygroups here, and then like this, right? So I have my auto groups with UVs already set in there. So to UV here in ZBrush, I'm gonna use the Z plugin, and that's gonna be the UV master, and I'm gonna click this option, polygroups. When you do that, if you have polygroups set like this, it takes way less time for ZBrush to calculate, and at the end, it's gonna generate basically like all of this stuff is gonna be inside of one single UDIM, right? ZBrush only recognizes one UDIM. To export the maps from multi-map exporter, it exports in multiple, but to generate in here is just one. So it's gonna generate one, so I'm gonna bring this model to Maya, and then I'm gonna do this distribution here, basically. I'm gonna move stuff around and find the best spots for them, how many UDIMs I'm gonna need based on those calculations we did the other day. And then, but I use Maya quite a lot, like for those operations of like unfolding, and it's pretty nice. Like all those tools they have for UVs nowadays, they're really good. And they have lots of interactive ones, right? The ones under tools in here, they're interactive. They have the unfold. It's basically like a paint tool, right? But if the model becomes a little bit heavy, sometimes those tools get a little bit too slow for you to use. But in this case here, we want to do things fast. So, and yeah, it's not going to be a big deal. So let's do this. And then the last UDIM is going to be this guy. Let's see if we can just split like maybe like this, and then move this guy. This is basically like the ears. Look how much space I have for the ears, man. I don't need the UVs to be this big here, One thing that's very useful to do is to actually assign like a checker pattern to your model, and then so you can actually see the scale. And one thing that the layout helps here in the UV editor, when you use layout, is to actually keep the proportions. And that's why I prefer to use more UDIMs, because I want the proportions to look correct. So I think the first step I did here before I moved all the stuff was to use the modify, and then let's see, layout, this guy here. And then at layout, you have a bunch of options. And one of them is this preserve 3D ratios, right? If you use preserve 3D ratios and you do like a layout, that's gonna actually preserve the actual size of the object in relation to each other. So all of those little aisles are gonna be proportional against each other. So if you assign like a checker pattern, it's gonna look pretty much like very even across the board, right? And then there are a bunch of options in here. So there's distribution, full square. So if I apply the way it is here, just so you see what happens, that's gonna distribute like by default to one single UDIM like that. But everything is proportional. All those guys are proportional according to the scale in 3D, right? But then there's the distribution here, and you can actually put like a 1 to, let's see if we can do this, 1 to 5. So 1 to 5, for example, is actually distributing like this, right? So it's creating its own version of what I did, what it thinks it looks better, So it's also preserving the 3D ratio. So Maya has all those tools that that you can actually use, so see, basically this is like a version of what I had before. You just pick like different pieces to fill in those gaps in there. But interesting, this one, it didn't preserve the 3D ratio right here. I think there is one extra option. Translate shells, distribute. Interesting. I don't think he preserved, like there's one piece here that actually became very big, but actually, yeah, interesting. In the past, like if it's uniform and preserve 3D ratio, it should be fine. But maybe it's this option I'm using like with 5 tiles. See, this piece here is a mirror of that one. It looks very different in size, and it shouldn't. But the ears and everything else looks the same. So I don't understand why this piece here looks bigger. Anyway, in general, it works. So, but we did like most of this manually. I just show you how to do it. So that's my new go-to model for this guy. So although I'm gonna be changing things slightly, right? Like from time to time, like doing a little tweak here and there for the secondary, even the primary forms, it's much closer in terms of UV space than what I had before, which was conforming to another model. So now that I have that, I can just export this model back. good practices is to basically just delete by type and then history just in case before you export anything. I think Maya doesn't care; it just exports whatever you have in here, but just in case, just to eliminate some history in there. So I'm gonna save it as export as obj, and this is gonna be our new base mesh. So I'm gonna call it head lr new base mesh 1. Okay. So this guy here now, let's go back to ZBrush, and now this is the model where the new UVs we're going to be using for this guy, right? Like now they're all fixed. There's no intersections. I'm going to go to the lowest level, going to import it. Okay. And now when I import it, like the UVs are basically gone, right? So I can just go back and then recreate them, polygroups. Sorry, not UVs, polygroups, and auto group with UV. So they are recreated in there. And so how do I start painting those maps? How I approach those maps? For the model itself, where we are sculpting the displacement maps, we're going to use the same exact model to paint the textures in HD. So that's going to be painted, like the albedo color is going to be painted in HD. But every other texture in here, because they're so simple looking, for example, a specular map, you don't need to paint the specular in HD or the bump height in HD. They are too simple. So that would be a waste to have like multiple HD models. So the way I approach, I basically click the top model, the main model I'm sculpting with the HD geometry, right? And you can just click duplicate. And then when you duplicate, you remember like my highest subdivision level was 1.1 million. So when you duplicate, all those models are gonna reach that same maximum resolution, right? And then you can subdivide further. So for example, like when I duplicated this guy to paint the specular map, in this case was Stan Winston. So instead of like reaching that 1.1 million, which was what the duplicate gave me, I subdivided once more, and then I reached like 4.4 million. And then for this guy here, I subdivided to 4.4 million, but it was overkill because you don't need it. The map is so simple, you could totally handle like at 1.1 million, right? There's no noise or anything. It's just like a plain black and white map. But yeah, so that's the difference. Basically, like it's the same model that I'm using for the displacement, just duplicate it, and then with an additional subdivision level on top of the non-HD and no HDA whatsoever applied to any of them. So that's how I started them. So let's see now that we have the model fixed in there. We're gonna have to make sure that the UV I just recreated for that base model, right? The UVs we just re-imported. I'm gonna make sure I go to the lowest resolution of all those guys here, and I'm gonna import that base model to each one of them to make sure that everything is synchronized, right? So I'm gonna get import new base mesh, import new base mesh, and import new base mesh. So they are all synchronized now. If I click the little brush in there, you can see that all the stuff is back in place, just like conform to the new UV. So next time I export all those maps, I'm gonna get a nice match for my new UVs. So let's do this one too, and then this guy. You all have a nice UV now. So let's play with, let's start playing with this map here first. Before the, like I said before, like the albedo we're gonna be painting next Monday. Starting Monday, gonna be the entire class just like painting color. And then, but the other maps, those other two maps, the specular and the bump height, we're gonna be exploring. And the bump height is gonna be the first one. So let's switch to flat color so you can see it again. So that's the map we're going to be working on. And like I said before, I mean, like it needs some adjustments in here, right? Because this is not conforming to the new model. Like the ellipse came from another model, and then in this case here, there's a little bit of a stretch in there. So I'm just going to switch back to my standard. I'm going to duplicate it. So clone, and I'm going to eliminate the alpha from here altogether. Make sure my stroke doesn't have any lazy mouse or anything. So it's a very simple brush, you know, without any alpha assigned to it. So I'm gonna turn off my Z sub. I'm gonna turn on just RGB because I'm just painting textures, right? And then I'm gonna basically gonna sample this coloring here. And again, this is gonna be dependent on how you're gonna be tweaking those maps inside of Maya. You see, in my case here, all my colors are very, very dark, right? Uh, there is no reason why I could not go lighter than this overall. And then in Maya, we just have to use like different values for the exposure in there. But either way, if you have a darker map, as long as like the relationship between what's the lightest part and the darkest part, they are talking, you know, having a conversation in there, and everything is proportional within that you know, color space, then you should be fine, you know. But in this case here, let me just gonna blend back just this outer edge of the lips in here to get a little bit more of a gradient in there. So I'm gonna use a RGB intensity very low, something like 3, and I'm gonna click the color pick in here, just drag and get something around the border in here. And I'm gonna extend this, start blending corners in here just to add a little bit less of that sharp line. And then around here, I'm gonna also do a little bit more blend. So this is gonna be what's gonna control the height of my bump. And what I can do, I can actually introduce a little bit of bump in the lips instead of like super shiny, right? And I can just like add a tiny bit of that. So it's gonna have a tiny little bit of breakup in there, kind of like a micro cells in there, but without too much. It's just like to break that super glossy feel. But without rendering, there's no way to know. So this is like it's multiple passes, right? You have to go back and forth from Maya, and then make sure what's to look at what's working and what's not, and then tweaking back and forth. The good news is that those maps export impressively fast, right? Because it's just like from 1 million polygons or 4 million polygons model, and it's just color. There's no displacement involved, so those should export really fast. So for the nose here, let's see. Let's try to even out this area here slightly. Just get that, and maybe add a little bit more of a shininess to the sides as well. So I'm gonna get a little bit shinier here. So just like I pick a darker color, just introducing a little bit more dark in there. And then everything here is gonna be the same process, right? Like the areas you want more shiny, just paint a little black. The areas you want a little bit less shiny, paint white, and that's about it. So let's say, let's get a little bit around here as well and correct the eyes, because again, it came from another model. And so let's just go and introduce a little bit more. Oops, not that. Oh, there is this bug in ZBrush as well. So for example, check this out. So I have flat color selected, right? That's for material. If I'm using like a color like this, like that's not quite black, it works fine. So I'm painting stuff in there with a with a very dark color, but not completely black. It paints fine. As soon as I switch to full black and I try to paint, it changes the shader. Look at that. So it goes back to the old shader. So yeah, it's tricky because it's a bug. Another one for the list. So normally when I paint, I'm just like, I try to avoid using full black, but really close to black. You can go like maybe like one point less than black, and you should be fine. I just like painting in this shader, like the flat shader. It's easier to see what I'm doing. And at any time, if you're not able to see, you can always go to render, and you can go to adjustments and say adjust, and then you can do like a gamma, for example, right? And you can adjust it right here. So the only thing is that sometimes we forget that we are doing this, and then we keep painting, for example, an albedo color, and then all of a sudden, like you export to Maya to render, and it's like, huh, that doesn't look anything like in ZBrush, and then you forgot that you have adjustment turned on. So this is just like in case if you want to go and really capture the right colors and paint things correctly in here. But then don't forget to actually turn it off later. Otherwise, you're going to be fighting it, I'm going to try to paint correctly, and then my ZBrush is going to counter that. So I'm going to just render, adjust, turn it off. And let's export this one and do a little test. So this is going to be our bump height map, the first one, right? Again, like use the visual reference if you want. I can do, for example, like let's pretend right here in the forehead, like I said, I want a T-zone, but then the top here, I think it's too shiny right now. Like I'm barely going to get any bump in there. I'm going to add more bumpiness by introducing a little bit lighter color. So I'm going to paint this top area a little bit wider like that, so it doesn't look too shiny. And I'm going to keep the T-zone more focused around the forehead in there, which I can actually extend. So grab a little bit of that and introduce a little bit more towards the temporalis in here, just slightly. And I like having this area here, you know, closer to the caruncula, very, very dark, not black, right, but very dark, because I like having that oily, almost like wet look around the eyes, right? It makes it look more alive. So I'm gonna keep that in mind, and I'm gonna just add a little bit more dark around those edges, right there. Oh, again, it went full black, look. Another way is to use like a skin shader, but skin shader, unless you change the material or something like that, you know, so you can see better, you can use like a diffuse, like a very high ambient as well, something like that. Then it should preserve the color. You can actually see it, right? So let's do that one. At least the bug stays away from us. So I can actually paint with black in here without switching shaders by accident. And then around here, you see like the lips are not quite matching that area. So I'm gonna just bring some of that dark towards the, closer to the edge, right? But not quite there. Do a little bit more of that. And I can even introduce tiny, you know, very, very fade version around the whole perimeter. Maybe a little bit shinier inside of the ear. And I can eliminate some of the shininess right here. So we're gonna get this a little bit wider. So yeah, so let's say this is our bump height map and you were happy with it. So I'm gonna just name it first. So I have my model selected with the map painted, and I rename it to bump height. And I'm using like 9 for my model when I exported my OBJ, right? So I'm gonna try to keep everything synchronized with number 9 and then go to number 10, etc. So I just got, from here, I can just crank my RGB intensity to 100, but I believe Multimap Explorer doesn't care about it, but it's good to have it anyway. So under plugin, remember that we had before, under Multimap Explorer was displacement, right? Now I can just turn it off, and you can just say texture from polypaint. And for the size of the map, let's be economic, right? This map doesn't have detail. It's just like very broad strokes. So you don't need to be overkill with the size of the maps. Just imagine that if you have like all those passes, all those maps assigned to everything, and all of them are 8Ks, you're gonna be, you know, consuming a lot of memory. So I could do like 1024 here, easy. But they're gonna go a little bit overkill with the 2K. Should be small enough. And I don't need to have like a switch morph target in this case, right? Because I'm not doing any displacement work. And then that's it. I mean, let's just export those maps and let's see how long it's gonna take. Source images, bump height 9 TIFF. Let's do that. That's 1. That's 2. 3. Should take just a few seconds. 4, and the last one. 5, and we're done. See how many seconds was total. 39 seconds, not too bad. That's gonna be it for like all those maps you're gonna be exporting. So let's start playing with this now. So let's bring back that that model that we had. So it was right here, our original model that has the subdivisions and all that stuff. And the first thing you're gonna do, let's assign a brand new shader, because this guy right now, I have this shader let's just graph, sorry. So let's see. So I have this, let's just rename it. So I have this shader called simply dark skin, which looks like let's get graph material selected. So the name of the shader is just dark skin like that, right? So that's the shader that's assigned to it. So let's do let's create another shader, and so we can play with it. So let's do a shader under Arnold, right? And then scroll to AI standard, and then you can just name here, for example, like bump height test, something like that. Let's assign it to this guy, right? And then now we can play with it. So the shader itself, let's see what we have in here. So the shader itself is a little bit too white. So I'm gonna be bringing this down. So I'm gonna make a little bit darker gray so we can see things. And at this point, we don't actually need eyes to test this. We wouldn't do like fast renders. So let's do let's see where those guys are. So head geometry, those guys. Yeah, I think that's all I need. So I'm gonna just hide everything that's under that node. So Control H. So that's all I want to render right now. So let's try. Before I do that, actually, you know, when we were rendering the displacement maps, we're actually subdividing this at render time, right? But if we're just testing a bump, you don't need to do that. You don't need to subdivide it. So click the model, go to the properties, the second tab, go to Arnold, and then scroll down, and you can just turn off the subdivision, right? So we're not subdividing it. Or you can just do like subdivision level 1. That should be fine too. So let's bring our window in here for the render, and let's see how this works out. Just turn it off. So that's what we have right now, right? So not anything fancy. Let's go back to our material here. Just turn this specular a little bit more rough, and then gonna lower it as well. It's a little bit easier to see, stuff like that. And then now let's play with the bump height map, right? But before we do this, let's just start with the bump itself. So how we plug bumps in Arnold, right? So under the material, like in your shader, so you're going to scroll all the way down. You have specular, transmission, subsurface, coat, and then you're going to have one that says geometry, right? So under geometry, you're going to click in this little checker on the side of bump mapping. And then you have all those textures by default, but then we don't want any texture from Maya. You want something from Arnold. So under Arnold, if you click texture, you're going to find one that says AI cell noise. They have one that says AI noise as well. Both would work for like this kind of stuff, but the AI cell noise is a preset that's like a crocodile skin that's really cool, actually. So if you click that one, there's no way for you to plug like the alt color automatically. So we're gonna have to pick one of the channels. I normally like just expand the alt color and then click the red. So click like alt color red, and then you can go to bump value. So we're gonna click this one. So they are now connected. See, like when I click it, they go like italic. So that's basically like they're connected. And now the connection is made right there, right? So let's close this one. So under the bump value, now we have plugged the noise, right? The AL cell noise. And then you're gonna see there are a bunch of patterns in here. So by default, if I start experimenting with it, so I just render, you're gonna see it's a very broad noise like this, right? Then I'm gonna start playing with the scale of the noise. For example, if I do like 5 instead of 1, get more repetition, right? You're gonna get like this repetition in there. But you see like the noise itself, let's just isolate to a small area so you can see it. The noise itself, it doesn't have a lot of variation, right? Because it's just 1 octave here. If I increase the octaves in here, it's gonna increase complexity, right? And then you can combine that with a even bigger scale and you get some interesting effect. Now, instead of noise 1, there's all those patterns in here, cell, cell 2, and then there's this alligator skin right here. So if you click that one, by default, it looks very simple. You know, it's like by default, it has this larger scale like this, right? So it looks like this kind of weird little texture. But remember that this is just with using just one single octave. If I increase to 2, you get more complexity. 3, even more, right? And you start getting very interesting in terms of like the variations of the patterns in there. And this is the kind of stuff we were looking for when we want to use it to break up the specular even further in between all those borders we're sculpting right now. So let's go back to octaves like just 3. And let's make sure that we get the scale fairly close to what we want. And I normally check is check this against the nose area. So I'm gonna use like a scale like maybe like 50. Let's see if it's too much. Let's isolate it around here. If it's too much, we can reduce like to around 30 or so. Yeah, it might be a little too much. Let's try 30. Yeah, it starts getting a little bit more interesting. Let's just zoom in. Get back to the nose in here. Like between nose and muzzle, let's see what we got. Yeah, you see it starts getting a very interesting little pattern in there. So it's like, it's a tiny little noise. If it's too much, again, like you can keep playing with the scale until you're happy with it. Maybe I can use even less of that. But at the same time, remember that I'm not even using any octaves at this point. So let me just use like maybe an even smaller scale, maybe 20. And yeah, there you go. So now we're gonna be able to see the pattern, right? But now we can increase some octaves here. Let's do 3. So yeah, it starts breaking up more interesting. So you get like little bumps here and there, right? And then that should help like to break up the everything. So in terms of the scale, I'm gonna trust that that something slightly bigger, actually slightly smaller, might be more helpful. Otherwise, this is going to start fighting with the pores and all the stuff we have going on in there. So I might have to stick with something between like 25, something like that. And then you're going to notice that if I crank now the specular, let's crank the specular. I'm going to go back here, click, and then back again. See, it's very, very rough, the surface right now, right? So I can actually go here and crank. Where is my specular right here? I'm gonna crank the specular to something a little that's was supposed to be much more shiny. So for example, like if I go to 0.1, you're supposed to be very shiny if we didn't have any of that, and the height all the way to 1, right? This is the kind of stuff like if you didn't have that bump, this would look completely shiny. It would be like very, very shiny. And I can show you this by going to, again, like to the cell noise node under geometry. And then I'm gonna go back just one level with this one. And for the bump depth, I'm gonna just start to 0. So that's how shiny it is, right? Like that's how much we are pushing that. But the thing is, like now that we're using this, the cell noise, this is basically like making the entire surface more diffuse overall. So with that in mind, the whole plan here is to be able to kind of modulate that. You know, it's like a control what areas you want a little shinier and what areas we want a little bit more rough without any specular. And that's when the bump height that we just got from ZBrush is going to start playing an interesting role. So let's go to 0. Actually 0.02. Oops, 0.2. Yeah, so at this point here is kind of like an in-between, right? So you're getting some shininess, but the shininess is actually being diffused, and it's going to create that little tiny specks, basically like hitting the tips of those little, you know, peaks in the bump map. So let's play with the, now that we have this in mind, let's play with the bump height map that we just exported. So we're gonna plug it exactly what I'm playing with right here. So by default is 1, right? Create this very rough because it's so high. But I'm gonna click this guy here, so the checker. I'm gonna go to File. Back to shiny, right? Like it's showing shiny. I'm gonna turn off any filters I have. I always turn everything off. And before I do anything, I'm gonna go all the way down to Arnold. I'm gonna turn off the auto-generate TX textures as well. In my case, in your case, if you were running out of memory, you might use it. For the UV tiling mode, make sure for every single map you import that you have this set to UDIM. It's very important. Otherwise, it's going to load just the first map, and then you're not going to get the result you want. So at this point here, let's plug the map we just exported. In this case here, it's pointed to a different project. Let's go back here, because I was borrowing some maps from Jessica yesterday. So let's go back to African tribes, and then source images. And that's my bump height we just exported. So I'm going to click the first one already with the new UVs we just set, which look very nice. By the way, those UVs are not going to match this guy right now, right? Because this is a, yeah, we're going to have to transfer over. So let's do this before you can continue. Because if you remember, this is not the new model. This is the old model, right? So how do I transfer the UVs from one to another model? Let's get, so let's get this guy here. So for example, if I have like the main model right here, I'm going to export back the mid-resolution mesh, which matches the resolution I have in Maya at this point, the subdivision level 2, right? That's the one we're using. I'm going to export it to OBJ, and then new base mesh. This is going to be the MR, so mid-resolution. Done. I'm going to bring it again here. Import. And then OBJ, this guy here, new base mesh, okay? So this one should have like the new UVs. So the way to transfer it, I mean, like you can redo the whole thing, right? Like you can assign, just put all the values again if you want, like using the Arnold tab, or you can just transfer over. So to transfer, let's just get this stuff. So, oh, I hate when it does that. Like my outliner is busted. Sometimes it gets busted. Let me see if I can do again here. Yeah, oh, see, like it's not selecting. Let me try to close it all together. There's some bugs like in Maya, man, every time. Let's see if this one works. Nope. It's almost like it has like a copy of the outliner. It has like 2 outliners overlapping, and then one of them is busted. So when I try to select anything, it doesn't select. It doesn't show in the visual, but it's actually selecting the object, but it doesn't show like it is selecting. And in the past, I had to, you know, go to a different one of those like layouts for it to kind of like clear that for me. But it's like such bullshit. You have to actually jump over all those bugs from different softwares every time, and it doesn't matter how many versions they release. There's always something busted. So this one is selecting now. I see like I can select things. So very weird. So I have like all those poly groups that come from ZBrush. I don't need them in here. I can just delete them. And then I'm gonna go, so this is the latest one that has the nice UVs. And this one is the one that has the busted UV. Not busted, but the old UVs. So I can select like the new one and then select the old one with control. So new ones, old one. I can go to modeling, and I'm gonna go to mesh and transfer attributes. I can say I want to transfer what, like the vertices? No, actually just UVs. So I can just do like a transfer all the UVs based on topology, right? So we can do that, and that's about it. Let's see, just transfer UVs and based on topology. So let's try this. It's gonna think for a little bit. because the model has like 69,000 polys, I believe. So it takes a good 30 or more seconds. So let's take a look. But then once this is done, I mean, like you are happy with the UVs, you don't need to do this again, you know? And then obviously the other way is to actually just simply import the model and then go to the attributes of your mesh and then basically like have to reset all that stuff for Arnold, right? But just as a way to do it, you know, on like one go, basically that's the way to do it. So let's see, you kind of like stopped spinning, and then it should show the result in a few seconds. Just thinking now. Let's see, the two UVs should match. Okay, spinning a little bit. Then as soon as this finishes, I have to actually delete the history, because if the history is still hanging, then if you delete the latest model we just imported that we are using as a source, it's going to delete any changes that were applied to the old model as well. So remember to actually delete it. So now we can click either this one, the old one, or the new one, and the UVs are exactly the same, as you can tell right there, right? So I'm going to click like both, or just like the original one. And you can go to edit, delete by type, not to be confused with delete all by type. Don't do that. Delete by type history. And now if I delete just this one, my old one should have the new UVs. So we are ready to go. So that's the way I normally do it. So let's go back to this thing. So we are playing with the maps in here. So let's see, like in terms of render, what's going on. So we still have it very shiny. Let's get my attribute editor here. And let's go and switch to the shader itself. Bump height test. Go to the last one. Where is it? Specular geometry. Get geometry, cell noise is assigned there. Let's go back one level. So I have the bump depth in there assigned. And at this point here, I didn't plug the map just yet. So let's plug them, because we're doing this little fix in there for the UVs. Just to make sure that we have everything synchronized. Otherwise, we're going to be, you know, it's like we forget those things. We're going to be spinning. And I was like, why we have those seams now? Yeah, because you forgot to update your, your UVs. That's why. So it's, now they should match perfectly. Right? So now I have a map assigned to it. But one thing you're going to notice here, when I assign this map, although it's a black and white map that should be working fine, it still doesn't show like, you know, it's like I was expecting to see more shininess around the lips and the nose and all those parts, right? But it's not doing it. So let's check why is it not happening. So if you go under color balance inside of the textures node that you just plugged, go to color balance, and then you're going to notice there is alpha is luminance in here. So if you click that one on, now you should get a little bit more response. Let's see how this area here around the lips is going to resolve. Remember that I cranked my my UVs, not my UVs, but my specular pretty high in here, so you should be seeing a lot of noise around this area here with from the specular pass. But I want to see the lips themselves, if it's working. Sometimes you have to actually crank those values in there, the alpha gain, especially if you did like me, and it was like you painted very you know, it's like dark tones in ZBrush, then you're gonna have to crank the alpha gain. So let's try to do this now. Let's see if the offset, yeah, the offset is actually working. So it is working, it's just that I don't see, yeah, okay, I'm gonna have to control with this guy here. So basically, like if I go all the way back, that's back to shiny, right, from the alpha gain. And then as I go up slightly, I'm going to start seeing the texture breaking up further and further. I think what happened with the lips is that, remember, instead of like completely black, I actually switched to a little bit more of like a dark gray, just so it's not so super shiny. I think that's what happened. So let's just zoom in here. Let's compare an area like lips and nose. Let's see what's happening right there. So the nose is getting a pretty good amount of specular in there, and then less specular around here, the muzzle, and then more spec again around the lips. But then if I play with the alpha gain here more and more, I can start eliminating a lot of that. So I'm gonna have to find like the sweet spot in here based on the intensity of the maps I painted in ZBrush. I would say like maybe like half of that, so like 0.5 in my case. But that's because my map is fairly dark, right? Remember what I was painting right here? It has this very dark map. So, you know, it's like if you had much more whites and stuff, that we probably would not need like to reduce. So let's see. Yeah, starting to reveal some stuff in there, but yeah, I'm gonna have to find the sweet spot. But, you know, at this point here, we can try to blend this with the color that I had before and see what happens. The important thing is like we want to try to get like all those tiny micro details to actually break up the in between the displacement map stuff that we had, right? So if I do, if I simply plug like the displacement map to this guy here just to see how they mix without the shader, we can do that. So let's just get back to the shader network. And it's a little messy in here. Let's get, so I have the bump height test. That's this new shader we just created. And the dark skin, which is the original in there, right? So if I can just click, for example, let's see, this one we are not using, right? This is the head new base mesh. This is a different map we don't need. So let's just click this map and this, actually those two nodes. And then I'm gonna go to graph, input and output of connections. And now we should show like a clear version, view of that. So it's easy for me to see what's going on here. So you see I have the displacement map plugged right here to the displacement shader of the dark skin. So I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna move this guy here so we can get them pretty close. So that's the dark skin shader, the old one I was using, and this is the new one here. So I'm just gonna get this displacement shader, and I can do this. Click the bump height test first. Actually, click this guy here, the blue one. And then you can simply click and mid-mouse click this guy, this node, and then drag to this. And now they're connected. So it's connected to both the old shader and this new shader. It's the same displacement map assigned. So the only thing that's missing now is that we removed the subdivision of this guy. So I'm gonna have to go back and crank to 3 here for subdivision again. So we should be able to see a combination now of the displacement plus this bump height, the micro bump, right? So let's see if it looks any good. So I can see my pores in there. Actually, look at that. It's actually, this is the displacement that was matching the old model. I didn't export a new displacement. That's why it looks out of place in there. So that's one thing we're gonna have to do. You're gonna have to export the new displacement. So let's do this. You're gonna export a brand new set of displacements matching the new model. And then meanwhile, you guys can just like fire any questions you have. And I'm gonna be responding. So let me just go back to this first. Material, let's just bring my ambient and diffuse back a little bit. Let's just export this. So go to the lowest, export, just to make sure I have the lowest, new base mesh. It's the same one, but just to make sure. Yeah, let's do it with another name just in case. So this is my lowest resolution. And then let's go do that little process, right? Just go to morph target. delete. So store, switch, import, and I'm gonna get the same one, low res space mesh 2. And let's export those maps. So I'm gonna turn off my texture from Polypaint, don't need that. Just displacement, 8K, switch morph target, and everything else is the same. So subdiv level 2, blah, blah, blah. So let's just, last thing is to actually rename this guy here. So I'm just gonna rename it to displacement 9, which is that series we have. And let's export it to source images. You guys have any questions? Let me know. It's a lot of little things to remember too, right? Like sometimes if you're tired, kind of, you know, miss something. I do this sometimes, you know, it's like, I was like, oh, I missed a little detail, like this one, right? Like trying to render with with an old displacement map. But yeah, the objective is to get to something kind of like this and just keep refining it. At this point, the lips are super shiny, so that's what I'm trying to resolve now and move forward. And hopefully that trick with the color, by shifting it in ZBrush, you know, that's gonna help to, you know, to find out like a mid value for it. The reference I was looking at, kind of like, there is one here from this guy, and I liked it because it was kind of like a natural light, like in the sun. And I like the skin tone as well. It's just that, you know, when you have like an outdoors light like this, the sun is hitting straight on, right? So you're gonna have a very tiny specular in there. So sometimes if you wanna do something like this, either get this an HDRI map that has like a similar lighting with just like a sunlight in the sky, just like a small source. Or you can do that as a simulation, like a studio lighting, right? You can create like a tiny little circular area light, just change the shape to circular. And then you can find out, okay, how much, how big can I get, right? In order to, or how small can I get in order to get like sharp shadows like this? Probably very, very tiny, right? So the thing that I do that helps me a lot is a combination of using HDRIs and area lights. So in case of, if you have like an HDRI map that's very diffuse, like the one I have, like that kind of like a cloudy passage or whatever it is, it gets me like very, very soft shadows. So in order for me to catch more details in the skin, I end up like simulating this kind of like flashlight effect. And I can show you guys how to do it later, probably not today, but it's basically like an area light I make like very tiny, kind of small. And I simulate like if you're a photographer photographing like a, you know, it's like a red carpet or something. You're probably gonna have like someone helping, maybe holding like a flashlight on the side. Old school ways, like if you remember, well, you're all young, you don't remember that, but it would be like a photographer holding like a big flashlight, kind of like above his head, kind of like a offset to the side and up, and then that way he can get like a little bit more of like closer to a 45-degree right angle. So what I try to do, I create a little area light, like circular, so the reflections can become like circular as well. You can plug to the light an HDRI map, for example. You can have like an umbrella. So basically, like when you render, you're gonna see a reflection of in the eye that resembles an umbrella shape. But in this case here, it's just like a regular circle, and then I try to keep offset of the camera slightly to the right and up, and I constrain to the camera. So no matter where the camera is pointing to the subject, you're always going to get that light that's it's not like straight on, like to the point that's going to hit the eye straight on, but it's slightly up and to the right. And then the only thing I have to be concerned about is like the compensation. You know, it's like how are you going to compensate like for distance, right? Like, because if you're very close to the subject, it's going to illuminate more, right? If you're further from the subject, it's going to illuminate less. So sometimes I just animate that, you know, it's like if I have a series of angles, I can just like, you know, animate the intensity. And then for each one of those angles is gonna work fine. The advantage of that is that you're gonna get very, very crisp specular effects. And basically like that Stan Winston that I have, that it looks like he was photographed from, you know, with the flashlight. That's the exact effect, you know. It's like there are certain things, like certain effects in the skin and especially like eyes and teeth, that are much easier to achieve when you have like this, you know, flashlight effect. You kind of like, it's easier to sell the realism that way. So let's see how my ZBrush is going here. Right there. Oh, because it's still thinking in the background. Let's see. Yeah.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Fala, Thiago.
Did I just cut somebody?
No. I think you're fine.
So how can you explain again, how do you mix the displacement map and the bump heights on the shader? Because I didn't quite get that.
Okay, yeah. That's a easy one. Let's see. So the way I had it before, remember, like I started with a brand new shader, right? And with a brand new shader, I just plugged, the only thing I plugged was just the bump height. So I went all the way to geometry, and then I clicked the bump mapping, clicked the little checker that was in there, and then I assigned this shader from, actually is a texture from Arnold. If you look at the right here, so texture, and then you have cell noise. And then the only thing I had to do was to click like the red channel. You connect the red channel to the bump value, right? And then I had my bump assigned to it, but I didn't have any displacement mapping here. What I did, I actually reused the displacement that was already plugged in another shader network before. But if you don't have that, and if you want to do it from scratch, you can always go to this little arrow in here, the second one, not the top one. Click that one, and you're going to get to this spot where you have the displacement material, and that's where you're going to plug your map. So you're going to click that one. You're going to choose the, you know, the map, the location, all the stuff, and then go from there. That's basically it.
Oh, okay, cool. Thanks, man.
No problem. Let's see if my ZBrush, I think it just finished. Yeah, there you go. 6 minutes 33 for all the goodness of all those HD geometry displacement maps. To me, that's amazing. So let's just replace those displacement maps. So let's get this guy here. Look at the maps we have right now. So we have head LR8. So let's replace it with, let's see, displacement 9. So displacement 9, that's the latest one we exported. And let's see if it found the 5 tiles, so that's good. Let's see if the render now looks better than this, right? Because that's what we want. That looks much better. So that matches my new UVs. So yeah, it's gonna start getting more interesting, you know, because you're gonna get a little bit more of the, not just the pores now, you're gonna get more of the in-betweens, right? Like all that good stuff. And once you have the correct amount of specular assigned to everything, then things just start looking much, much better. Like, you know, it's like straight away. Now for this guy, because he has a very dark skin, I don't know if I'm gonna go a little bit lighter or not, but if I keep like very dark skin, I might have to use some roughness map to just like be able to actually control the lips and some other areas with a little bit strong, more strong than what I have with just like with the bump height, you know. I might need that additional control, but I'm gonna try to push as far as I can with just like these maps. And that's the way I prefer working with my renders and my portraits. I try to add as many maps as necessary. So if I need just like 3 maps and the results are coming, if I don't feel like it's overkill, you know, I just keep like super simple, just like a few maps and that's it. But if something is not quite there and I'm not achieving the effect, then I start adding more maps. So for example, like for some of those models, when it gets to XGen, I end up like painting a bunch of maps, like for the density, for, you know, it's like to create like a split hair and things like that. So yeah, we might have to do that. But this is pretty cool because I'm seeing like that, like I said before, I was careful not to add too much displacement around the nose area, right? So it's not like it's gonna break up the surface too much. And then because of that, combined with the bump height being very dark around this area, so now they start playing nice. So I get the reflection I want, which is fairly diffuse, right? Because it's breaking up, but not a lot, but it's still breaking up. And then I'm getting some shininess in the lips, but without being the mirror that I had before, just because I decided to do that adjustment in the color. Right, adjustment in the color, and then see, like for the lips in here, I'm probably gonna have to paint a little bit higher this dark area here, because when I'm looking the render there, you see like you're getting a lot of the micro bump kind of like invading this area here, and it's still a little strong as well. I might have to reduce the micro bump slightly. And then basically it's gonna be a back and forth, like testing it and rerunning it. So I'm gonna just stop it. I'm gonna save this store and go back. And let's tweak this very, very slightly. Let's see, get my model itself. And then for the bump, I'm gonna go back to the bump depth one. And remember we were playing with the alpha before. I went all the way to 700, but I might have to use like less than that. So maybe like 600. That's gonna cause a few things, right? Like the first one, that things gonna get a little bit more shiny around here, and probably more shiny around there too, right? Because I'm not using that much of it. But let's go one step further now, and let's plug the shader that I had before. So that's just the color. Or we can do even better here. You can actually just transfer one thing, copy the attributes from one to another one, so you can see things being built in real time, basically. So what you can do, if you want to copy stuff like attributes from one shader to another one, the best way to do that, for example, if you click this one, the old shader, right? You see this tab that appeared in there. You can say copy tab, and then you have a duplicate of it like that, right? And now you can click the new one, the new shader. And now the copy is in here from the dark skin shader, and this is the new one, which is the gray one we are testing. So I'm just gonna copy stuff over like manually here, just so you guys can see how things change. So maybe like even with the render on the side, if we can handle that, let's see if we can do. If it's too slow to render, then we can do differently. But let's try with that. Let's keep on the side in here and see some of those changes. So first thing, let's just play it, let it render in there. And then first thing you're gonna copy was gonna be the specular. Instead of like 1, I'm gonna put 0.4. Reference is okay. Gonna do 360 here. And then no transmission because there's no transparency at this point. The subsurface, if you wanna copy color and stuff, it's very easy. You can just like, let's just crank the subsurface here pretty high. It's white in there. So if you wanna copy this color to there, you just click in the color. So just by clicking on it, it's gonna save in the last, actually the first slot in there. So if I click the subsurface now, it's waiting for me right there. So I'm gonna click on it. Same for this guy, click this one until it shows me right there. It's right there, right? So I'm gonna click this one, oops, right there. And now for the scale, it's still very, very high. I'm gonna do scale at 0.135. And for the random walk, instead of like random walk 1, I'm gonna use random walk 2. If you don't have random walk 2 available, that means you're using an old version of Arnold. And in that case, you're gonna have to go to the Autodesk area, or you can just type like what's the name of the company that makes Arnold in the past? Was I forgot. Well, you can just say like a Arnold update, Arnold render update. You can Google that, and he's gonna send you to this link to the area website, like which is basically Autodesk. And then if you have a login, if you post stuff at the Autodesk, you know, it's like you can download the new version. And yeah, just if you ever downloaded anything, like if you're using like an educational version of Maya to do this class, for example, I believe you have to have the area access. So I can just go there and just download the latest Arnold. But make sure you have the random walk 2 available in there. So for the coat, that's the last pass that we need. It's still a little weird in there. It's very shiny in the nose in there. This can be a combination of the way you're using those maps or adjustments in the paint we're gonna have to do in ZBrush. We're gonna have to figure it out. So for the coat, I don't have anything right now. So this is the one that's gonna add this oily kind of aspect to the skin. Let's get 300. So you see it got very shiny now, but the roughness is very low. So if you keep rendering this one, you're gonna see everything's gonna be very, very shiny. It's almost like it's wet now. But if you crank this one to 520, something like that, then it starts getting a little bit more diffuse. And also it's gonna get like all the, if you have like a blue sky as a environment, it's gonna capture all those blue reflections, right? Like in the skin, which is really cool. And then the last part here, I think, is the shin that we added a tiny little bit. So let's see, shin 0.05. And the roughness was kind of low. Let's put like 150, a little bit higher than what we had before. And that should be
Chris,
like, yes.
do you ever use normal maps for anything?
No, not really.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, because at work, client only wants us to use normal map, and I don't really understand why. I work on animation.
Is it games?
No, it's animation.
Oh, animation. Interesting.
Yeah, really weird. But yeah, so I was wondering if you had any nice tricks of mixing normal maps and displacement maps.
Actually, I believe the way that's gonna work, you're gonna plug the same way you plug the bump mapping here. I think we're gonna be plugging yeah, I think you plug right here. But I have to do the research actually. But I think it's plugged in the same spot. There are a couple of sites.
We plug it right there.
Oh, okay, yeah. It's probably here, right? Like a tangent normal space normals, yeah, or object.
If you ever see 2 of my name on the list, it's because I'm logging on my phone because I don't have a microphone. So
okay. Yeah.
I'm not doing the group cheating thing.
There you go. There's a bunch of you in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's basically like the beginning of it, you know. It's like all this stuff is going to be like, from this point on, hours and hours and hours of poking around and trying to figure things out, you know, especially since I don't have a lot of experience with dark skin painting like that, like manually painting. I'm going to have to figure out a lot of this stuff. But I mean, like, this is just a plain color with the displacement and the micro bump assigned to it. And like I mentioned before, things like these imperfections around the lips, for example, are going to have to soften it a little bit in ZBrush. So I can do this a little bit here now. And anything that it's hard to guess, right? Like when you're trying to get stuff done, there's no way for you to just like simply paint something in here and then believe that everything is going to magically work in Maya. It's always a matter of like rendering and rendering and rendering many, many times until you get the result. So, and then the cool thing is that because we are in charge of the entire pipeline, basically, the thing that makes me really happy doing my own personal work is that at the studio, especially the big studios, you depend on too many people, you know. It's like you do a pass on your model and then you send over, and then especially like VFX, you know, it's like in games, I believe things are, it has to be faster, but in VFX sometimes like it drags, you know. It's like it takes like many days sometimes for you to get like a pass of you know, it's like a not a displacement, but like a color map you can play with and see if the model is actually working with that. But in our case here, we are controlling everything. So if I'm seeing the renders that the specular map is not working the way I want it, I come back here, tweak those maps, we export. It takes about 30 seconds, right? 39 seconds to export those maps, and then go to the next one. I even gonna make the eyelids a little bit darker than they are in here. I want to make sure that it has that nice little shin. I'm gonna do that like for the eyelids a little bit more like wet than I normally do. Yeah, since I'm here, right? Just a little tweak. Maybe the chin is a little bit too dark too, so I'm gonna just make it a little bit lighter. And you see I paint everything with a very low intensity, like 3, sometimes even 2 or 1, you know, just like if I'm trying to add like a subtle stuff. Yeah, it's still rendering like in the background, so I'm gonna just export this one, those maps, and I'm gonna just rename this to bump height 10. We export it, and then let's move to another map, which is the specular map, because we still have half an hour, so I can talk about it and do a little test. So texture, let's do the 2K again, no switch morph target, and that's it. Create all maps. I don't even know if you take in account that I'm using subdivision level 2 in here. Let's just, for the sake of it, let's put subdivision level 1. Actually, no, it's gonna match the model anyway at subdivision level 2. Let's skip 2. And then export as 2K. So let's do this and see how our render is doing. Yeah, I started to get some interesting stuff, like very, very shiny, right? Shinier than I would hope. So it's a combination of things at this point, you know. It's like it might be that the specular level is too high, which you're gonna be controlling with a map anyway, right? It might be that the bump height is maybe not as high as I would hope, but in this case, I think it is because it's breaking up very nicely in there. And I can definitely see the breakup right at the edges of the lips, right there. So I know it's working. And one thing to keep in mind as well is that those render tests that I'm running here, they are very low res, right? So if I click my properties in here for the renders, for the render properties, actually, it's not as bad. I'm using 8. I thought it was at 6. But sometimes what happens if you have like lower samples, some of this weird noise that you see sometimes, it might be from the texture itself, like from the bump that you're getting, like those tiny little specks of you know, bright specks in there. But sometimes it's actually just the lower anti-alias that's causing it. So for example, if I save this as is right now, let's try like view, store, snapshot. So we have it to compare. And then let's just, for the sake of it, crank this one to 12 and just isolate a small area. So let's do just like the nose from here. Oops. Nose from here to this muzzle area. Let's do that with a higher anti-alias, just so we can actually compare it. Let's see if it makes a big difference or not. It's a little longer, but should not be too bad. So this one took a little longer because it was running in the background, so it took a minute to export. So while it's doing that in Maya, let's jump right back here to the specular map. So the specular map is, let's go back to a regular shader here, startup material, and let's modify the material so you can see it a little bit better. So ambient and diffuse. Yeah, I'm gonna be able to see pretty good. So we have this specular map, and I know, and I mentioned that it to me is a little bit too noisy, right? I normally like to have the noise in here, but I think for this character specifically, if you have too much noise, it's going to start looking a little weird. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to even things out a little bit. So normally what I do, if I'm painting it, I have a brush in here that's poly paint. So this one here. And the way I have set up, I have like this alpha, which is an alpha that comes with ZBrush. It's called alpha 23. And the color spray, make sure you turn color all the way down because we don't want to mix. Otherwise, it's going to be basically mixing those two colors when you paint. So I'm gonna just remove the color, and then that's basically it. So if I get like let's crank all the way to 100 so you can see exactly what I'm painting here. So if I'm painting here, that's the type of effect you're gonna get, right? Now in this case here, if you're trying to actually mix things up, it's like remove some of the noise in there. That's not exactly what you want to do, because this is actually what's causing the noise, right? So either I can turn off the alpha and just use the color spray, so it's basically a little bit more broad like that, or completely eliminate it and just use a very low intensity brush. So I'm gonna go like to 2 for the intensity. I'm gonna pick like a white in here, and I'm gonna start just like blending those areas a little bit more, maybe a little bit more intensity, 5. So instead of like getting that super noisy stuff, I'm gonna get a little bit more even with it. So I'm gonna do this around here. For the lips, as you can tell in there, I removed some of the specularity so it doesn't look so shiny, right? So, and I did that by making everything a little bit darker in the lips. So it's not like black, but it's definitely darker, right? But again, this is gonna be a combination of how you paint this map and how you're removing the bump with that map that we just plugged in there. Another way to remove this noise that we have here, obviously, is using smooth. So I'm gonna turn off the Z add. I'm gonna keep just the RGB. I'm gonna bring the smooth to 10. And then let's maybe like switch to a flat color so I can see it. And I'm just gonna smooth things out a little bit. So that should work as well. Yeah, so it removes a little bit of this noise. That should, I think it should work better for this character if it's not as noisy as before. But to paint the noise is basically like my approach is to use this spray brush that I just showed you guys. I can do a little demo here. So I start with a very broad, like a big brush. So for example, like a big, if I paint like, let's paint a weird color here, for example, red, or yeah, something like that. So I start with a big brush like that with a low intensity. So for example, let's do like maybe like 10 for intensity, a little bit less than that. So very big, like a big brush, and you get like those color variations like that. Imagine that this is all black and white, right? So I'm gonna start with like a, it's like with the base, like with a mid-level gray for everything, and then paint the whites and the blacks. So I start with a big brush like that, with those maps, with those brushes, alphas and color spray plugged to it. And then from this point on, I start like increasing the intensity and reducing the size of the brush. And then I get a little bit more, another level like this. And then I'm gonna go even higher and then smaller. And then more and more, you start breaking up the detail into something that it becomes very, very detailed at the end. But underneath, especially if you're painting this stuff I'm doing here in black and white, it creates like layers, it's almost like it becomes deeper than it looks. So if I show some of that stuff here, for example, right, you see like there are like tiny details around here, but around here they start blending with those. It becomes almost like a fractal cloud, right? Like there is that effect in Photoshop. It's just like a cloudy thing that you assign in there. And basically like it's a combination of doing like multiple passes of this. So instead of like just painting without any alpha assigned to it, just black and white, like large brushes, you always use the spray to create something more organic. But try to use like variations for both size and intensity to create like multiple levels, So it's smoothing out is actually producing an interesting effect here that I actually like. That's removing the super specky stuff, but still keeping this organic feel to it. So that's gonna work. Let's do this one. And as soon as I finish this, we can bring this one to Maya and do a render and be able to control the specular map. And then same thing, it's like from time to time, if you have like all those maps plugged, it becomes harder and harder to, you know, to bug track if some results not quite there. And in that case, you have to remove some maps, you know, it's like you basically like disconnect some of those maps and you start like again, one by one. So remove the bump height, for example, if you're trying to figure out the specular map, and then do like a pure render just with the specular map, plug to it to a simple shader. And then if that works, you move to the next one and the next one. The important thing is that every single one of them has to be working nicely independently first, and then all together, right? I kind of know that those ones kind of gonna work together because they're coming from a line of different characters I already used those maps for, right? So I know that they're gonna work in a certain way. But if you're starting a brand new model, yeah, you're gonna have to experiment and back and forth with the render engine, you know. I'm gonna just start with white in here. Just gonna make this area a little bit more pale because I want a little bit more speck in here. I think it's breaking up too much. And then I'm gonna smooth it out. Maybe the smooth can be a little higher too. Yeah, something like that. So anything you want here to create more specularity, obviously you paint like white, right? Every place you want less specularity, just paint black. Actually, yeah. In this case, yeah, that's what happens. Another way you can do this, I mean, like you can paint the opposite. If you feel like you know, it's like you're more used to paint like the specular with black, you can do that and just use an invert. There's a checkbox in the textures in Maya. You can just like click invert, and you can either use like black for one and white for the other one, or the reverse of it, and it should work fine. And then around here, I'm just gonna paint a little bit more white around our T-zone using the spray, right? But then smoothing it out a little bit. Just create this more organic, kind of cellular kind of effect to it. The lips are gonna leave a little bit darker like that, just to prevent this overly shiny effect. So let's say if we have something like this, let's test it out. I think like the sides could be a little bit shinier as well, but you know, this whole area here is gonna be more bumpy anyway. I'm probably gonna have the stubble as well. And then I don't need to go too shiny in there. So like I don't need a lot of like, you know, it's like lighter areas. I think I can keep a little bit darker. And then, but again, like all this stuff, only rendering to know what's gonna happen exactly, right? We have a ballpark, and you know that's gonna go in a certain way, but you know, precisely it's hard to, you know, before testing. I'm just gonna smooth out this whole area, back of the neck. And that's it. Let's export this map and plug it and see what we get in terms of like different results. So let's do, so this is gonna be the specular. We're in version 10 now. And go back, plug in texture export. This one I'm gonna actually use higher resolution, maybe like 4K, because I have some spec in there. I won't be able to capture those little details, but doesn't need to be 4K. So specular 10, let's do that. Should take another minute or a little bit less than that. And let's go back to our render. So now let's compare that with this, right? So you see, like in terms of noise, it makes a difference, right? So for example, if I have something like a very good like zoom like that, this is the new one, this is the old one. You can definitely see around this area here, around the pores, that this is much more clear, right, than this one. So that's what I'm trying to say is that sometimes you're trying to render stuff and then the render looks a little noisy, or the skin starts having like all those little fireflies and, you know, it's like a little white specks. And sometimes it's not an artifact of the specular itself, but rather like a anti-alias problem. You know, it's like the anti-alias is too low, So it's interesting because if you are really trying to create something like a realistic render, you have to go higher, you know, with stuff. My renders, when I do like for Instagram, they are like 900 by 900 normally. And I normally use 8 for the other areas. But for tests, I normally use 6. But if it's something very delicate, like a micro bump and stuff like that, I try to even do the tests around like 10 or 12. So I can actually see how it's actually breaking up. Or if it's just like the artifacts, or you know, it's like sometimes like it looks like the surface is much more rough than it is. It's just because the noise created by the low anti-alias is actually creating the effect that's like a diffuse reflection. And then as soon as you crank this, it becomes like mirror, you know, it's like everything, it becomes much more shiny than you had before. So keep that in mind, you know, it's like that actually changes the aspect of the texture. So now we have a specular map to play with, which is really cool. So let's just turn this off. Let's bring it back to 8 that we had, because we don't want to consume too much of your time right now. We have 15 minutes, so let's do view, store, snapshot, and let's play with that. Like I said, ideally, you would basically like start with a new shader at this point and just plug and play with the specular map, right? You can do like just bring everything to complete black, for example, and just like get the specular to look correct. But I have an idea that, you know, it's like this is gonna work with the map that I have, at least the ballpark. So I'm gonna just plug it straight away. But remember, like if you're starting from scratch, try to start fresh, you know? It's like if, for example, like when you're researching subsurface scattering and you're trying to discover what's the right scale for it, right? The best way is to start like breaking down things like with different lights. You start with the backlight, for example, right behind the ear. And then with that backlight, you can see the redness caused in the ear. And then you can just like use the slider in there to just like control and see like how much, how far the subsurface scattering is going to go, right? You want the redness just within the thin areas, but not the entire ear. Otherwise it becomes like very glowy, right? And then everything is broken down like in little pieces now. Like I said, like because I'm doing this for a while, I kind of like know that the map's at least gonna give me a ballpark. But again, like if you don't have anything, you start from absolutely from scratch. You know, it's like if you want to make sure that the specular looks correct and everything, just like start with a brand new shader, plug just a specular map, bring the color down to like almost black or a very dark gray, so I can actually see the spec, you know, and go from there. So let's go to the coloring here, to my shader, and then let's, yes.
So it is now when you also calibrate your intensity on the textures and intensity on the light. Remember that I asked you that before. How do you calibrate your textures to not be too bright or too dark compared to the lighting?
Yeah, I mean, like at this point here, like I said, like a lot of those things are already tested before. But you see, like that's the model that I have in there, the one that we were testing, just the micro bump, right? And my intensity for my HDRI here is not very high. It's actually, I think it's like 1 point. No, this one is actually at 2. I think it's because this one is a little bit more of kind of like, it looks almost like a cloudy day. It has an interesting thing. One thing I forgot to mention here is that I'm actually using ACE for the color space. If I switch this one to the regular sRGB gamma that I normally use, it gives me this result here. I'm just trying to look for something a little bit deeper than that. So that's why I'm using the ACE. And I'm actually trying to calibrate my colors to go with the ACE's color space, you know. This is like an experiment in here. I want to see, because it seems like the darks, when you have the ACE, they get much more interesting, like a little bit more, you know, it's like richer. But I think even with the sRGB gamma, if you start playing with the gamma in the exposure, you can get a similar result, you know, but you're definitely going to have to tweak it in there. So that's the kind of stuff, like in the past I would use just sRGB because all my monitors are calibrated for it. But you know, I'm just doing it as an experiment to try to figure it out if it's gonna work or not. So gamma 1.
So you never use the grayscale ball and the chrome ball?
No, I don't use the chrome ball. I use the, I'm not gonna say I use the grayscale ball. I just use like my model, like in grayscale, it's like 50% gray, you know, to get the ballpark. But yeah, like I was never like a TD guy, you know. It's like I see what they do, for example, at work, you know, it's like with HDRI maps matching the chrome balls and all that stuff. But I did like for a few of my models, you know, it's like I created the chrome ball and things like that. But then at some point I was like, you know, I gotta try to be a little bit more creative with what I have here. And I start testing, instead of like using just one chrome ball and the gray ball, I start testing like a vast array of HDRI maps. And then, you know, it's like there was a scene I have, I think like, which class was that? I think maybe it was Stan, I don't know, or maybe my wife. I had like probably like 8 or 9 different HDRI maps plugged like in dome lights. And I was testing with every single one of them until I got like to a ballpark that was like, okay, this works across different HDRI maps, you know. And then that's basically what I stuck with it. But by all means, I mean, like if you're a guy that, you know, it's like you have more knowledge in terms of color and color correction and things like that. I don't think my color correction skills are very good, to tell you the truth. That's why I don't trust, you know, that I'm going to be able.
Actually, I'm not good at it. So that's why I'm asking, right? Because ZBrush and you paint your maps in ZBrush, and it's great because I kind of do the same thing. But then sometimes they end up being a little bit too dark or too light, also depending on the material that you're using in ZBrush, right? So sometimes it's hard to judge that.
Yes.
And then at the end you have to play in Maya, as you did with the alpha gain or like some color correction node or some stuff like that to make it look good. And I guess it's because we are free to do what we want, and because we are not in production right now.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. But at the same time, like what I try to do, sometimes like I start with this, I'm a little bit OCD, not by much, but a little bit. But for example, I was doing all those color correction nodes here in Maya, but it was actually bothering me because it was like, what if I want to incorporate certain things and I don't have the map, you know? It's like, I want to make sure that I have absolute control over it. So that's why for this character here, my intention was to actually bake whatever adjustments I did in here and then send to ZBrush to be able to start from there. But since I removed the map completely and now I'm kind of like based on the reference, just like visually, and trying to get the ballpark of the color without any textures assigned to it, I think I'm gonna end up doing this, you know. Yeah.
The color thing now in ZBrush, it's amazing, right? So
isn't it amazing?
If you use a node now in Maya to correct something, say, okay, this is what I need to do in ZBrush to get
exactly, man. It's so good. I mean, like, and it's so easy, right? Like, it's just like it's a brilliant idea of like switching colors for the poly paint. That's brilliant.
Yeah. Love it.
Yep.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, thank you. So we have now, let's see. So we have to plug the specular map. So let's go to the latest one here. And let's go to specular. And so I'm going to be plugging this as a weight. But before I do this, let's try something else here. It's like, I like to break this into 2 things, right? Like first we're gonna control the specular and then we're gonna go to coat. My coat is set to 0.3, so I'm gonna keep that in mind. And then my specular, I'm gonna start with it first. So I already reduced my anti-alias to 8. So let's just try this area again. Make sure that I have it saved in there. Yeah, it's saved. So just gonna do a quick render. And let's plug, so I have 400 in there. And that's just specular right now. So let's click the weight. And let's plug map. Turn off my auto generate TX. Turn off the filtering. And let's get the maps here. And I have to switch to Mari actually. So source images. So now just with the specular, it's not showing a whole lot in there, right? because I'm trying to plug a map in here. So it's kind of like, it's countering the whole thing. Let's plug a specular map, 10. Okay. So I'm seeing there, let's see. A good way to test it, if you bring the exposure down, if it's not reacting at all, or up, if it's not doing anything, so you can see like it's not changing any value, that's because it's a black and white map, and the black and white map is normally controlled by the alpha is luminance. So if I click this one instead, now if I go up and down, I should be able to control it, right? So you can see it more and less and more specular being controlled in there. So let's see how this one works at the 2. If it's too much, I can go back to 1 and see how it works. Let's see, thinking a little bit. Okay, so let's see compared to that one. So this one doesn't have the oily, which is the oily pass that people call like a sebum, right? Like I think sebum is the basically like the oil in the skin. Sebum pass. Yeah, so that's an interesting one because you see like my specular has a very, very low number for the roughness. So it's like 0.1, right? So that's gonna cause things to get very shiny around those areas that I painted completely white, right? And also it's gonna create that little effect that the skin has, that property that you remember like seeing in those pictures that I was showing before. Let's see if we can find any of them here. Katrina, no, not the best one, but maybe him. Like if you look like from pretty close, the breakup sometimes causes, let's see an area that you can see it better. Tiny little specks, right? Like tiny little specks like that. But then obviously if you go more and, you know, from a bigger distance, then everything kind of mixes together. But then if you go closer again, you see those tiny little specks again, right? Everything is so shiny. It's a very, very shiny surface. But you don't see that unless you go really close, right? If you go from here, that looks like, you know, it's not even that specular at all. You know, it's just that's the difficult job, right? Like to find what's the correct amount of displacement. So the displacement just goes like right below the surface, like into the pore. And you get this effect from up close and this very, very plasticky effect. But at the same time, when you go from a distance, you start seeing less and less of the specularity. So that's you see, like in my case here is very, very shiny. So I'm gonna have to play with the speck and then try to get this a little bit closer to what we see in there. So in this case here, if I have my weight to 2, like I had just now, I can start playing with it and maybe bring back to 1, and even like a little bit less than that. We can try 0.8, for example. Let's get a smaller area. Let's try a little strip from here to the lip. And then let's go back to this one and play with normally what I do, I use the same map that I'm using for the specular, I use for the coat, but I just have different controls. So, you know, if I have this guy here controlling this, I don't want to plug the exact same map. I want to actually use, I'm going to plug the same map. I'm not going to plug the same node. That's what I'm saying. So in Maya, you can plug like the same map to multiple nodes. So I'm going to plug it, the same map with as a different node. So I'm going to just click this weight here. I'm going to go to File. And then same deal. Let's plug it. In the shader network, you can actually press Control D in the map and then just duplicate it and then replug it to the right channel. But in this case, I'm just going to show like, you know, how you do it manually. So basically the same specular. Now, to have more control, to actually create a decent sebum kind of pass, like the actual oily parts of the face, this map would have to be a different map from the specular, right? I'm doing this out of laziness, and and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, then I don't mind to actually go there and tweak it. But again, I'm gonna test it here. If you're using the exposure and nothing is happening there, that means you're dealing with the black and white map, and alpha's luminance is the one that's gonna actually create the effect. So if I go all the way down, there's no specular whatsoever. And because my map is a little dark, might have to crank this one to something higher, like 4, for example. So it's pretty specky now. Gonna go back to 3 maybe. Gonna have to, find that balance in there. But at least we can see that's working. And then because we have a little bit of that noise happening here, that's gonna help a little bit. It's a combination of the noise in here combined with the displacement map, combined with the macro or micro bump map. Everything is gonna increasingly turn the skin a little bit more and more complex, to the point that we are gonna completely lose that impression that's kind of like a plasticky surface that normally CG has that effect, right? Like everything looks a little plasticky if you don't have anything plugged to it. So you can see some effects of the specular right here. You can see like there's a little bit of noise happening. So this is a little shinier, this is less. So there's a little, it starts getting a little bit more and more complex, And at the end, once you have everything plugged, you're gonna have like it's like some stubble plugged in there, some peach fuzz that we're gonna have to figure it out. Normally, like since he's not Caucasian, I wonder about the color of the peach fuzz. It's like if it's gonna be dark because it's like there are different types, right? Like the peach fuzz sometimes, like in certain areas, become almost like a proto hair, so it becomes darker. So I believe like the peach fuzz here is gonna have to be darker as well. So we're gonna have to take a look at that. I don't think I have any reference of like peach fuzz on someone with a darker skin. But yeah, I'm curious about that as well. So you see like from this map to this one, it's already a much better result. So I basically like reduced the specular to have less of those little fireflies, tiny specks. And then you start adding more of the sebum effect in there to get more and more of the speck. But again, I might have to actually play with those maps and see if both plugged, actually the same map plugged to both channels, is gonna work for this character, or if I'm probably gonna use a different one for the sebum than the one I have for the specular. Yeah, it's starting to look more interesting. Although there's a line in here, there's a straight line happening there. Seems like this is a little busted. Might be that the map didn't completely load. Interesting. It shows that the 5 are loaded, but sometimes what happens is that, it's like if you're rendering while we are doing something here, like actually, loading stuff, sometimes you have to actually go to render and then do an update full scene. So actually the maps are forced to reload. And if that doesn't work, sometimes you have to go to Arnold, flush caches, and then all. And then you do the render again. And then sometimes the map just reloads. I'm going to have to check it out. But I like what's happening around here, for example. Like there's interesting stuff. There's some variation added in there. But here seems like there's a straight line right here, which I don't like. So I don't know exactly what happened in there, but yeah, so things start to evolve a little bit. Yeah, I like the much nicer, especially around here, right? That we had like all this super specky stuff, and then now it gets a little bit more like a little bit more natural. Yeah. So yeah, that's basically what I had for today, like in terms of the content we are be talking about. All this stuff here are going to be going back and forth. there's this period like between like this week that we are just cranking, right? Like spores and all this stuff is all like a lot of information to take in. And then next week is going to be kind of like a lot of it as well. You know, it's like things just get a little bit more and more complicated. Going to be doing like the painting and then talking about eyes, the shaders for the eyes and all that stuff. But the thing is, like during this weekend, I'm going to be doing my own research about like, you know, darker skin, subsurface tests here and there, you know. And then so you guys can do the same on your side, and then we can, you know, exchange notes. But I definitely want to be in a much better, you know, spot for you to share the shader. You know, it's like from time to time, I'm going to be updating you guys on the shaders. You know, here's where I'm at. You know, I changed this and this parameter. Those are the values I'm using. And basically sharing everything I have in here, you know. So if I discover something that's more interesting, I pass information back to you guys, and we keep studying together. For the reviews this Saturday, if you guys gonna make it, it's gonna be basically like a deadline to you know upload all the material is gonna be exactly 25 hours from now, because it's gonna be like midnight of Friday, right? So basically, you have 25 hours to come up with something. Don't need to pressure yourself too much in terms of you know, it's like create something that's, you know, it's like completely impressive at this point, because we just got out of the, you know, the sketch part this week. Some of you guys start retopologizing and adding some of the pores. Some of you guys are still struggling with the pores, which is natural. It takes some time and a few passes, you know, to get used to it. But don't pressure yourself too much, like to present something that's almost like finished or anything. You know, it's like I'm, you know, far from finished from anything. But try make an effort to be there. You know, it's like to show the work and to come up with your questions. You know, like part of the appeal to this class, like the live one, is for you guys like to get direct feedback. So try to use that. You know, if we have to have like a 5-hour review session, I don't mind, as long as you guys are getting value for what you're expecting. So if you didn't get the email, please send me a message. You know, it's like a private message or another email asking for the links and everything. But I sent an email out with all the information. The Google Drive, I saw some of you guys started to upload stuff, which is really cool. And there's all the information in there. There's the link for the meeting. It's going to be a different number for the meeting, so make sure that's in your calendar as well. And it's going to happen 9 in the morning and 9 at night here in San Francisco. And so for you guys, going to be like depending of location, obviously, but sweet.
Chris, regarding to that, so we all see the reviews of the others, right?
Yes.
So okay, so that was my only question.
Yeah, I would say like the ones in the morning, the first session, it's the longest because most of the people want to do that time. And then at night is normally like more chill. So keep that in mind. And also it takes some time, you know. For example, I started calling it like alphabetically, like the first name alphabetically, like last time. So I might do the opposite, you know, kind of like do like, okay, let's go backwards this time. Just so like the people like who with letter A, you know, is like go first, and then the people who starts with Z, you know, gonna be the last one in line. Like I'm seeing like in the listing here we have like Sander and Robin, and I was like they're gonna be like all the way at the end in there. So we might have to do that, or I can just do randomly. You know, it's like we can just do like put like a bunch of names in the hat and then pull them.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because it's a little bit of a torture, man. I understand that. You know, it's like if you're kind of like your name starts with a Z and you're like, oh man, it's like 3 hours later and still waiting. You know, it's like, so I don't know exactly how to solve the problem, but if you guys have suggestions, I'm totally gonna take it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a great rest of the week, and I talk to you guys on Saturday.
Well, have a good night.
Yeah, and also in the group, of course. But yeah. All right. See you guys later. Cheers.
Bye, guys.